Good afternoon and welcome to Oracle's Enterprise Performance Management session entitled Boost Your Agility with Connected Planning and Budgeting in the Cloud. My name is Brian Jones. I'm the Vice President for Federal Civilian Agencies at Oracle, and I can't tell you, how excited I am to be here today in Washington, D.C. at the AGA. This is my first time in like 2 years that I've been, out and meeting with people, so it's invigorating to be getting back out and meeting with everybody. So thank you very much for coming. And as you can see from the session description, this is going to be an informative and very interesting session. We've assembled a great panel from the Department of Energy, Office of Science, and the House of Representatives. These are real experts here that we'll be talking to you about how they're using enterprise performance management today. So as we get going, I'm going to kick off a panel discussion that will go for 15 or 20 minutes. Then we're going to pivot, and you're actually going to see how the Office of Science at Department of Energy is using EPM today. It's a live demo. I think it's going to be fantastic. Once we finish that, we'll take your questions. Please submit them through the Q&A capability. So as we get going here today, I want to take a few minutes to introduce our wonderful panel. So Kathleen, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Clausing. I'm the Budget Officer for the Office of Science. I have been with the Office of Science for 14 years. And I have been in the working on federal budget for, believe it or not, this year it becomes 30 years in government. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. And Geneva.
Hi there. Hi, Brian. Hey, my name is Geneva Dooley, and I have been with the House for just over 15 years, working on various financial systems implementations. So I'm definitely more on the implementation side than the budget office. We work very closely with them, but I've done various different systems, PeopleSoft, and some other stuff like that. So right now EPM is our thing. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Geneva. And Sandra.
Hi, I'm Sandra Fam. I work for Kathleen in the Office of Budget, Office of Science, and I'm the lead on the creation that we did with PBCS and narrative reporting.
Wonderful. So as you can see, we've got a great panel, and we're going to jump right into it. So Kathleen, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to go directly to Geneva, and I'm going to ask you the same question. This is a little bit different with the virtual panel, and I'm here face to face with everybody. So let's hope technology works. So Kathleen, can you briefly tell us what issues and problems prompted the Office of Science at Department of Energy to start looking at an EPM solution? Oh, you might be on mute.
Sorry. When I first started at the Office of Science in the Department of Energy, we were working on a 1995 homegrown database that did not have decimal points, did not have commas, and did not have numbers that could go to the billions. And when we have a couple of our science programs that are over $1 billion, it really meant that we were relying on Excel spreadsheets an awful lot. We also could not do multiple scenarios, what-if situations. And so we knew we needed a new database, a database that allowed not only my office, but also the program offices to all be linked. So we were not constantly rekeying the same data. We wanted to make sure we were not relying 100% on Excel spreadsheets that had multiple worksheets to them and linked fields, because people going from one person to the next, people were breaking the links or a formula would be overridden. So it really took a long time to verify all the numbers and to validate that all the formulas were working. It became very difficult to do anything very quickly. And if a change came about, it really became a process to make sure there were a lot of checks and balances in place. And so, the Office of Budget outgrew its database. And then we also wanted to make sure, I want to use my analysts to be analysts, not to be data enters. And data entering is where people make mistakes because everybody's in such a rush. So, and again, we couldn't run scenarios. We couldn't run, there's a lot of restrictions we had that we were manually doing everything through spreadsheets. And that's just not an efficient way of doing budget, not in this fast-paced environment that we're in today. And we also wanted, another point, we wanted to link our budget narratives with the database so people could focus on the narratives and the justification instead of having to worry about, what number was updated, did they catch all the numbers? So we wanted the database to be linked to the narratives. So those were our main issues.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure everyone here that's in the room and out in the virtual world can relate to, the manual processes that you just described. Geneva, I'm going to ask you the same question. So I know that the House of Representatives has been a longtime Hyperion user. What issues prompted you in House of Reps to look at a new solution?
Sure. So like you said, we have been a Hyperion on-premise user for about 5 years. So as far as the data being in different places, we resolved that issue by adopting Hyperion. So we really have two different sets of reasons we went to the cloud. One, and they're very technical and very, very soft. So the first was security compatibility. We were on a version of Hyperion that only supported Windows servers or Windows 2008. And so we were getting pinged pretty frequently to upgrade that, but it wasn't compliant. So we had to upgrade for that reason. The other reason was Oracle support for the on-prem version. That was going to end. So we needed to think about that solution. So those are very technical. And then some very soft reasons we went were we've got a pretty young workforce and Google Chrome was not compatible with on-prem. So that was a big thing that everybody wants to use Chrome as their browser. And also the navigation and interface were pretty outdated and not very intuitive. And again, with a young workforce and a large user group of occasional users, simplicity is key. So really the drivers were security compatibility, Chrome compatibility, and then the beautiful new interface.
Yeah, all great reasons. I've attended a couple of sessions today, and actually the younger workforce and coming in with more modern technology, I've heard that a couple of times today. So Kathleen, back to you. Which EPM solution did the Office of Science at Department of Energy decide to implement? And if you can, tell us a little bit about your experience with implementation.
So we selected the Oracle Planning and Budget Cloud Services for the budget numbers and the Oracle Narrative Reporting for the budget narrative. We wanted to make sure we could get an out-of-the-box solution that is less expensive than a fully customized solution. We wanted to have integration with the CFO's on-premise budget solution. DOE uses Oracle Federal Financials in their accounting system, so we knew there was going to be compatibility there. And the reputation of Oracle and Hyperion products from other users and implementers. And what science did, the Office of Science did is, we went through Deloitte and they used a phased process, the agile process, where we had 2 phases for formulation rollout and 2 phases for execution. And we did this, we started the implementation in October 2019, and it took us about 13 months to be fully functional. And what the phase process enabled us is to get some functionality pretty quickly, both in formulation and execution. And then having smaller phases is by enabling us to bring more functionality to the users to really keep them engaged and keep them excited about the new product that they were actually working on. And, one example is that, as we were able to work in the system, we could immediately see, what worked, what did not, or what adjustments we wanted. And in the next phase, not only were we getting new functionality, we were able to get some changes from the first process. So again, the phased approach and Deloitte using their agile process really was a success for the Office of Science.
Boy, that is awesome to hear. Cloud technology, agile development, 13-month implementation schedule. That is just incredible work. Congratulations. Geneva, same question to you. Which EPM cloud solution did the House decide to go with? And talk a little bit about your implementation experience.
Sure. So we are actually using the Enterprise Performance Management Enterprise Cloud Service and financial reporting. Financial reporting going to the cloud was one of the big things we were waiting for. And when that was finally added, that enabled us to go to the cloud. We also use ODI along with EPM Automate and the EPM integration agent. And ODI was what we were using on-prem to load our data from Microsoft and Lawson. That's our payroll system. So we ended up maintaining that as we went to the cloud. Working with our integrator, Alpine Consulting Partners, we used a phased approach as well, and we also used Agile. And I think that was one of the keys to our success, was being able to get one phase done and move to the next. Alpine had prior experience migrating federal Hyperion planning already to the cloud, so that was really beneficial for us. And with that phased approach, it was over a year, we created 3 applications with 3 distinct user groups. We currently have 800 licenses, and the 3 different user groups are the member and committee office projections, our budget group uses formulation and execution, and our human resources department uses the human capital planning module. So we have a varied use across the organization.
Wow, that's outstanding, and what a great story too to hear cloud and agile coming together. And I'm sure your users were part of that process and felt the ownership of guiding the development and the implementation of your solution. So great work. Kathleen, back to you. Can you tell us about some of the issues and problems, or talk a little bit more about what you told us and the benefits, really important to the crowd here, the benefits that you've achieved at the Office of Science?
Well, one of the things we wanted to do is to make sure our formulation and our execution processes were linked. So the formulation process can roll over to the execution instead of, again, manually entering the information. We also had a lot of initiatives, crosscuts that we were manually tracking. For the climate and clean energy crosscut, it would take us almost a week in order to get those crosscut numbers, because it's just not, straight programs, it's subsets and percentages of some programs. Now, there's still a small manual piece we're putting into the system, but on the large part, I can get those numbers within an hour instead of it taking a week, because it is now driven by a database. All the numbers are in one place, and then you can run different scenarios from that. We don't have to worry about version control anymore. So we've got data accuracy now. We're eliminating redundant data entry. We have workflow and approval process routing now. And we can respond very quickly to data requests. And, one thing, connecting the numbers with our budget narrative for the OMB cycle and the congressional cycle. Even though the Office of Science, for the 2022 request, we were the last ones to get the numbers finalized. We were the only program that was able to go to print and have it done on the due date. And so we were able to turn everything around very quickly because it isn't a database. And Sandra will show you some of the benefits that instead of manually going through, everybody's spreadsheets, making sure they're linked, making sure the numbers are correct, then putting them in the budget narrative, it's all done electronically through the system now. And that has saved my analysts a lot of time so that we're a lot more efficient and we are spending time analyzing and looking at scenarios versus worrying about numbers.
What a story. Talk about efficiencies gained across your office and have to be happy customers, right, of yours, that you're getting your budget submitted first on time. Just incredible. Geneva, same question to you. Can you tell us how the new system has helped with the House of Representatives and the problems that you've solved and general benefits that you've achieved?
Sure. And so, like I mentioned earlier, already being in Hyperion helps us have the data all in one place. So we had already solved that problem. The main things that we resolved by going to the cloud were that we are no longer non-compliant from a security and support standpoint. So that's pretty important. And the next thing is the users enjoying the simplified interface. It makes a big difference. If anyone had used Hyperion on-prem, there were dozens of tiny icons, kind of similar to Word, across the top that no one was ever going to use. No end user would ever use those functions. So the simplified interface really is huge for us and user experience. Performance is also better across the board for the calculations. The nice, clean look really had some interest from our leadership. When you put something new and shiny out there, people tend to like it better, especially if it's easier to use. The navigation flows, which are kind of like tabs on a form, really help with end user navigation. That also helps with calls to the help desk, because when you're using the navigation flows and the simplified interface, it's pretty simple to know that you go to budget projections versus the way that you would navigate to reports prior to forms was a little complicated. So for the occasional user now, it's very obvious what they're clicking on. The pages and the forms render a lot nicer than they used to. Patching, because I'm more on the IT side, patching is now done completely by another team. We don't have to worry about it. That is one thing that we were worried about, was that patches might not be tested up to our standard, and we have not experienced that at all, which for any of you that doubt whether a quarterly patching process will meet your needs, from a testing perspective, we were really shocked. No offense to Oracle, but you never know.
None taken.
And so it's gone really well, and we've had in the time that we've been live, very few issues with the quarterly patching, and it's taken a lot of testing off our plates.
I bet.
And again, we were also able to maintain that connection to the drill through on-prem, even when we were in the cloud, which I know a lot of people had that concern as well. So even though our whole database is in the cloud, there's no issue working with a source system that is not.
Wow, you just hit on some major points here, from security, performance, automatic updates. I mean, as an organization, who wouldn't want that? You're benefiting from all of that because you've moved to the cloud. So congratulations and fantastic work. So with that, I'm sure everybody now can't wait to actually see the demonstration of how a Department of Energy Office of Science is using Cloud EPM today for real. So Sandra, I'm going to pass it over to you. Thank you.
Great. So I'm basically going to just log into the application. This is going to be a live demo. So hopefully everything will go smoothly, but apologies in advance if it doesn't. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go into the login screen. And because this is in a government cloud, we do have this message letting everyone know. And that's kind of to help us get into a higher level of security. And I'm going to go ahead and use my company sign in. So as long as I'm logged in, sorry, let me get back in again. Okay, so as long as I'm logged into our servers, I'm able to log into the application with no problem. I think part of the reason why they had me keep this open the whole time, but I'm going to open up the task icon right here. And this is the simplified user interface that Geneva was talking about, and kind of has a better look and feel than the old Hyperion on-prem. And going into the task list, our users know they can immediately come into this list and really see the activities that they need to complete. Because I'm an admin, I have access to all the tasks, but it's also broken out into separate folders where I have an admin task folder, the OBBA, which are the Office of Budget Analysts who work for Kathleen. And then we also have the programs who have certain tasks within this task list. So clicking on the OBBA tasks, I just kind of want to go over some of the budget formulation activities that we do. The first one is we have our master control table. And this is where we go in and Kathleen's able to do her budget planning at a high level. So these are all the Office of Science programs. And coming into this initial form, you're able to see from a historical perspective, FY21 enacted, FY22 President's Request, House Mark. Normally we'd be working on the 23 President's Request at this point, but I have flipped the application back so we can see the 22 President's Request, which is out to the public. But it basically allows you to kind of have a base starting point. Because we don't do zero-based budgeting, we do have a base starting point, and we grow our programs up from either the previous year President's Request or the previous year enacted amount. And you can grow that program by a percentage or by the dollar amount. So we kind of allow flexibility in our application to use either a percentage or a dollar amount, and then run a calculation to give the total impact or the total growth. Also, when our budget director, Kathleen, goes into this form, she's able to see the comparison between a different fiscal year. So there are certain cases where we're going to compare our, let's say, 23 President's Request against the 22 President's Request, or against the 2021 enacted. And that's all predetermined by the admin. But when our budget director goes into these forms and does her input, she has the ability to kind of see these calculations and kind of know how much we're growing compared to other budget cycles. And also, the great thing about this application is we have set some controls. So the way we do budget, we do top down and bottoms up. So, we're able to start at the highest level, and then we drill down to the lower levels until we get down all the way down to the program level that goes basically to the accounting code structure. So from the master control table, we're then able to go into the director's decision sheet. And this is the point where our budget director meets with the Office of Science director and has some conversations at a lower level. What type of things are important to the Office of Science? What research initiatives, which is really the first thing, which is across all the Office of Science, what research initiatives are important? And set a control number for all those research initiatives at the Office of Science level and for each individual program. Also, another piece that's of concern to the Office of Science is really our construction projects. So whenever I go into, I'm actually going to switch the program name. But basically, a lot of Kathleen's conversation with the Office of Science director will be around construction projects. How much are we spending on construction projects? Does it make sense in a given fiscal year to have any new starts, or to just continue on with the existing projects that are ongoing? So those are kind of determined at that higher level. Then there's also a few management priorities. So switching back to Oscar, which is another Office of Science program, we're able to see that certain specific activities within a specific program are called out separately. So for example, we have this graduate fellows program, or a training program that is very important to the Office of Science Management. So we call that out separately. And then from there, we also have, and you can see this is kind of really the largest bucket for our FY 2022 request. We have kind of a lump sum that we group in research, facility ops, and then an other category. And that basically allows more flexibility for the associate directors within the program. So although Office of Science Director and Kathleen kind of make some determinations on some of the control totals, they have more flexibility in the area of research, where a lump sum is provided to the associate directors, and then they're able to spread it down to the lowest level, down to that accounting level, and figure out what they want to do with their research dollars or their facility operations dollars. The reason why we broke it out this way is that, the Office of Science really wants to track the percentage research over the total Office of Science budget. So we want to ensure that we are spending 40% of our funding in research and 40% in facility operations. And in order to do that, we really have to manage at the program level where each program fits in those different buckets. So we're able to kind of bucket those items so that way we maintain that percentage. And, with this application, we're able to go from top down. So basically, at the program level down to the director's decision sheet, and then all the way down, like I said, what we call the detail table. So the lowest level of detail. And what we have in the application is we've added these control totals. So that way, what's at the lower level rolls up to what's at the higher level. And then there's a remaining balance or a change. So that way, if anything doesn't match. So if the bottoms up controls don't match the top down, the top down controls don't match the bottom up spread of the budget numbers, this column will turn red or orange depending if they have more money or if they need to reduce their budget. So it's really great having these controls in there. Also, what we've done, and a lot of budget analysts are interested in, and plus it's become such a high priority in the federal government, is crosscuts. So at this point, we're able to kind of look at our budget request. So this is the amount in our FY 2022 budget request. This is the amount that supports a specific initiative that also supports that crosscut. And then you're able to take a percentage or a dollar amount of the amount in your budget to apply to each individual crosscut. And the analysts will go in here and they'll update their percentage, or they'll add a dollar amount to support a crosscut. And it does get copied over year after year after year. So if the methodology is 40% of this B&R code, let's say it's applied math, supports climate clean energy, then every year we do 40%, 40%, 40%. So, this application is really, like Kathleen said, previously all this was done on an Excel spreadsheet. And, recently we just got a change to our narrative because a lot of times the guidance for the narratives come after we've already started the process of updating our narratives. And we were asked to update our fiscal years instead of including our FY 2022 president's request. They asked us to update all of our narratives to include FY 2022 annualized CR. And pretty much with this type of application, when previously it would take probably my staff at least a week to go through all the tables and make sure everything's rolled over and showing the correct budget fiscal year and where does a change get applied, a plus or minus. Now we're able to update that in the application and reflect all those changes in the narrative almost immediately. So, I really want to walk through from here. I kind of want to show you what we've done in narrative reporting. And I'm going to kind of bring this over here for narrative reporting. Okay. So this is actually our narrative reporting application, which is where we're doing all of our text. We do our congressional budget justification, our OMB budget justification, our memos, like our funding memos, our guidance packages to let people know about their allotments. And we also do our issue papers. And what we've done is actually broken out our narratives into individual smaller doclets, which are kind of the piece of the narrative. And before we did that, we've noticed that the Office of Science budget requests were getting each program was kind of submitting an independent budget request. So instead of our CJ looking like a consolidated Office of Science request and a consolidated one budget book, it kind of looked like each individual program was submitting a budget book. And that's where we did some scrubbing across the board and kind of standardized how everyone was submitting their narratives. And we determined that we broke it out by program narratives, sub-program narratives, so then each sub-program had a narrative. The supporting information, which is a lot of those budget tables that are required as part of the budget narrative, and then the data sheets, which are construction projects. So we were able to kind of break these out into smaller pieces. And then within each piece or docklet, we're able to create a workflow for each of those docklets. And some of these docklets, you would be surprised, actually get to, 40 levels of approval. So, by the time it goes to the program office, all the program managers, to our office within the Office of Budget, and Kathleen, who reviews every single narrative, it does get up to 40 approvers, and it does take some time. But previously, what we would have, like Kathleen was saying, we had a lot of versioning control issues where, we used SharePoint, but some people would take the document offline, or they would take it out of the system, out of SharePoint, download it, email it to someone. Then the people who were in SharePoint would still be working on the older version. Where in narrative reporting, we're able to see that this version is the latest version. This is the one version that everyone is working on. Basically what I want to do is kind of check out this document, and I want to show you the different pieces of this document. So I'm going to go ahead and check out. And it does have, just like SharePoint, you're able to check out the document so people know that someone is working on it, and they're not able to go in, although they can still view the document, they're not able to go in and make any edits. And then I'm going to open the document in SmartView. And one benefit of using SmartView is an add-in that kind of attaches to Microsoft Word. So what happened with our users is they're able to use functionality that they're already used to. Everyone's already used to using Microsoft Word to make edits to their narrative. And they were able to make these edits fairly quickly because they already knew how to use the system. So I'm going to go ahead and do a company sign-in so it's kind of connected to the application. All right, it keeps popping up on my other screen. And it does take a minute to open, but once it does open, you'll kind of see that it is standard Word functionality that everyone's used to. On the right-hand side, it does show the SmartView panel so that when you want to go to the next docklet or next document, you're able to click within the SmartView panel. And the other thing I wanted to show you is that within our narrative, there's actually locked content. So we went through a lot of our narrative and locked the content. So if you see, I'm trying to type in this cell and it says you cannot make this change because the selection is locked. And you would be surprised when we send out a template to the users, a lot of times they'll go in and make changes to areas that shouldn't be changed, that are part of the template. And so we've really locked it down. So we've created a variables for some of these items, and then we've locked down the content. And then within this other area, you can see I'm using track changes. They have the ability to edit. So people could really focus on the content and not so much on the formatting. I have to reformat the header and make it bigger because it's not big enough and all these things. Now they can really focus on the content of the narratives. Also what's available to us, so we have all our track changes on, but also all of our tables are locked. So when someone's trying to go in and make changes to numbers within the table, it's all locked because all those numbers are feeding from PBCS. So when I said, our narratives on Friday said FY 2022 President's Request with the President's Request numbers and the compare column to 23 requests versus 21 enacted. That was Friday. And then today, and actually we had it done by Tuesday, we changed all the variables to annualized CR and the numbers pulled in and the calculations kind of corrected themselves. So definitely, you know, our users are starting to see the positive impact of having a system like this, where previously, if we had a last minute change from CFO, excuse me, if we had a last minute change from CFO, it would take us, you know, like I said, a staff of people about a week to make those updates and, you know, update every table and know every change that needed to be made.
Sandra, scroll down so they can see that you have numbers that are imported into the data, into the narrative itself from the database. Yeah, you need to go up.
Yeah. So also with the text, within the text, we actually have different variables where it's all locked content and it's automatically updated. So if we get changes from CFO or questions about numbers or changes to numbers, once the application is changed, then all the numbers are updated. Excuse me. But, you know, you're still using standard functionality where you're using the track changes, you're using the comments. And then once you're finished with making your changes, and I'm actually not going to check it back in, but you can upload and check in. And then also you're going to do your approval right here in SmartView. So that way it can move to the next approver. Okay. Okay, and I went ahead and canceled the checkout, but you know, the document's now saved back into the application, and I can go ahead and close it and kind of work on the next document within the document. And eventually, you know, all the documents are approved and they're ready to move on to CFO. And even CFO is using the same application. So we're all using the same version.
That's one thing we did within the Office of Science is it's an Office of Science narrative reporting system, but to make sure we're all using the same database, the CFO analysts that are assigned to the Office of Science, we gave them access to our system so that they can get into this system and review our narratives. And then once it's finalized, then CFO will, you know, with the CFO reviews, they will then send it over to OMB in a different, in the, I guess, the Max database that OMB has set up. But only the analysts on science are within the science narrative reporting, just so that we're all working off the same system. We're not worrying about version control. And we're also working on the workflow, which, you know, goes through, you know, reviews within my office to the program office, to the program management, back to my office. You know, all the edits go back to the programs, then it goes over to CFO for their edits, and then it goes back to my office and the program office. So as Sandra said, you can have 40 people touch certain doclets, and we now no longer worry about version control.
Wow. I tell you that is incredible what you just showed. Is there anything else that you want to highlight, Sandra or Kathleen?
I mean, one thing that Sandra didn't show is in the database itself. We do take it down to a lower level where, you know, you do get. Go into not the crosscuts. Yeah, the detail table, and then just open up where people would enter the data. So you identify whether it's equipment funding or research funding or education, you know, funding, the BRNs. So the database has an awful lot of information in there. And as Sandra said, we start at the high, you know, the top level, at the program level, then we break it down into research facilities and projects, research initiatives, and then we take it to the lower level where, you know, some programs will have core research funding if it's not related to a specific initiative. and they have to identify which BRN it's related to so that it can be scored correctly. And this helps us, the lower level detail, helps us with identifying crosscuts as well. Anything else, Sandra?
Nope, that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you. That was incredible. I think what you just showed everybody today highlights what the panel talked about in terms of efficiency gain, redundancies lost, time savings. Geneva talked about security. Think about what's happening in many agencies today with the patching and the rollouts and the upgrades. All of that's happening automated. So it's huge efficiencies that both Geneva and her colleagues at the Office of Science are gaining each and every day by moving to the cloud. So that was very impressive. One other comment on that too, the usability. Geneva talked earlier about a younger workforce coming in. I mean, that was a very clean interface. They're growing up using Microsoft Word. That's there for them to leverage Excel-like capabilities. So just outstanding. So I think what we're going to pivot to now is some questions. I'm going to get an iPad handed to me. I don't know if there's some questions. Great. We get 3 questions so far. So I'm going to ask you, Kathleen, this first one. Most agencies are implementing ERPs that integrate accounting and acquisition. Most don't use the native budget modules. How did your EPM implementations integrate with your ERP or legacy accounting system? That's a great question.
So this is an Office of Science system. So what we've done is we were able to link up with our grant system as well as be able to get information from our business intelligence system in order to make sure we get all the data on the execution side. And so we do run that, but the Department of Energy has a standalone system of record for its accounting system. So that's where we make sure we are in line with that. We do get reports from that, but our system doesn't go over to the accounting system. It's the reverse direction that we get the actuals, and that can be put into our execution system. Sandra, you want to elaborate a little bit more?
No, that's right. So we have a one-way interface where we have data coming in, but the information that we are kind of doing in the execution side of our budget system actually could eventually and hopefully will eventually get pushed back into either CFO's planning and budgeting system, and then eventually get pushed to our financial system. So that is kind of in the future, hopefully, where we're headed.
All right, let's go to another question. I'm going to throw this out to the panel, so it's a first come, first serve here. Do your tools make it easier to manage operations in a world of never-ending, continuing resolutions? That's why I threw it out. Who wants to field that one?
I'll take that.
Okay, thank
yes,
you.
It does help us because, again, for execution, we were working on, working under a CR, and we had the numbers based in our execution side of the house. And when we had to all of a sudden change our formulation, we had the numbers already there that we can link it over and be able to populate our budget narratives. And it took us, people wanted to review the numbers knowing that they're now going out as an annualized CR number. But under the CR, the system runs, what is the length of the CR? It'll give us the numbers. It shows prorated what the numbers are, and then allows us to make adjustments so that then we can go forward and, kind of front load some of the funding to certain projects that may need funding up front versus doing just a straight prorated, daily rate. So we can make adjustments, but it allows us to, it runs it for us, and then it allows us to then go back and make any adjustments. So under the CR, it just, again, everything's automated. It makes it easy. It's not worrying about someone making sure the formulas in a spreadsheet were correct.
Great, thank you. I think I can answer this next question, given we had a webinar last week on it. Does it support management of the IT budget, which requires the use of technology business management? And the answer is yes. Out of the box, there's capability there that follows that taxonomy. If anybody wants further information on that, please contact me. As I mentioned, we had a webinar just last week on that. That was very well attended. Question, what does BRN stand for? Sandra?
Yeah, so it's actually what DOE considers their budget reference number, but it's just kind of a summary level of the object class codes. So it basically takes a combination of object class codes and creates a BRN, which is more of a budget term for it rather than using specific object class codes.
Great, thank you. Geneva, I'm going to toss this one over to you. Are there challenges when working in a secure environment?
Interestingly, we thought that was going to be a big challenge also at the House. Obviously, the members are pretty high strung about security, as they should be, right? And we were surprised at how easily we were able to clear those hurdles working with Oracle. Having the system be FedRAMP certified is beneficial. That took a long time. And I think it took a long time because they were very thorough. So we surprisingly have been really impressed with the way that it integrates with Active Directory. And it seems to be pretty seamless. And if our security guys approved it, it's most likely that yours will too.
Awesome, thank you. Another question. Since there is one way of interface, do you perform reconciliation of details in each system to make sure data in each system is complete and valid? Sandra, you're nodding your head, so we'll...
Yes, of course we do. So, we do run a trial balance. We also do the monthly reconciliations at different levels. So we'll do it based on, our obligations or commitments or whatever it is. We'll do that double check on a monthly basis just to make sure that everything matches in the financial system, matches what's in our Hyperion application. But, because the source is the same, we're kind of checking it against the source, which is what we've uploaded into our application. So that's something. And then also the data from our application, although it's not interfaced directly back into the financial system, it is keyed back into the financial system. So it's kind of a big circle. All of our data comes out and then goes back in.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, we're right at about session end time. I want to thank our technology people here with the AGA. This worked really, really seamlessly. I've never moderated a virtual panel and been on stage like this, but thank you, team here, for your work in making this happen. And thank you, everybody here in attendance, for listening in and in the virtual Zoom space. We really, really appreciate your great questions and most importantly, your time. And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much.